divorce care. And by the way, we've got another call about divorce care today. And I haven't even advertised it yet. It's solely word of mouth at this point. And they may be doing research on the divorce care website, but we're getting several calls.
Is this friends that are thinking about it?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll talk you out of it.
It's too late.
Actually, those going through it will talk you out of it. You'll see how miserable they are. But because of divorce care, and because I really was just kind of repeating myself in the Reaching Young Adult study, I've decided to preempt. And let's begin the Christian Lies We Believe series. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Christian Lies We Believe. God won't give you more than you can handle. How many times have you heard that? How many times have you said that to other people? God won't give you more than you can handle. Yeah, right. Tell that to Jay and Suzanne Paskey. In the middle of 1990, they were sitting together watching a documentary on the orphanages of China. They're engaged to be married. The next year. At that time, little did they know that what God was placing on their heart would eventually lead to the adoption of many children. When I say many, I mean 30 or thereabouts.
You mentioned 30 kids.
By the time the Faskeys had celebrated their 5-year wedding anniversary, they had been through 2 miscarriages, but they had also been blessed with 2 biological sons. God gave them 2 beautiful babies to love, but the images of unwanted orphan children still flooded their minds. So they decided if they're going to have more children, it would be through adoption. They remember saying that they were planning on having a big family one day. They wanted 4 kids. They had 2 of their own. They wanted to adopt 2 more. Now, often, when we believe the statement or recite the statement, God won't give you more than you can handle, what we really mean is we don't want more than we can handle. We want to be comfortable. Right? Isn't that usually what we mean when we say that? If we're honest, we make plans for ourselves that keep us comfortable, and we want God to bless those plans and stay inside those boundaries. And as long as He does that, we're good. When He doesn't do that, we think we're being tormented. When the Paskey boys were 3 and 2, they were in a terrible accident. One of them sustained minor injuries. The other had to be hospitalized for a dislocated hip, a major laceration to his leg. And after going home, he spent 6 weeks in traction. Watching their son in so much pain opened their eyes to realize that there are so many children in the world that go without the love of parents. They go without medical care that they desperately need, and they're hurting. This accident proved to be a turning point for the family. Now, that alone would be, God won't give us more than we can handle. And people were telling them that. God won't give you more than you can handle. You'll get through this. And like so many families that have gone through the adoption process, Jay and Suzanne had a mental picture in their minds of how magical the moment would be when they met their child for the first time. Surely it would look like them running across fields of flowers, jumping into one another's arms, twirling in the wind, and all would be good. That would be something they could handle. But instead, their story turned out to be 49 children running their way, screaming, "Adopt me! Adopt me! Adopt me!" Because they went to an orphanage in a foreign country. Actually, they couldn't understand adopt me, but that's what the kids were screaming. And some ran the other way because they were afraid of it, having never seen skin that color and hair that texture and color and so on and so forth. But a few months later, they're on their way back to India to adopt a child, a little boy. And before long, the Faskey family is at it again after hearing about a sibling group of 3 in Russia that desperately needed a home and a family, so they adopted them. And as the Faskey family began to grow, so did their influence in the lives of others, and God would turn this into a ministry. They approached their church family about starting an orphan ministry to help find families for orphans around the world. At the same time, they're asked to consider coordinating a summer host program for older orphaned children, allowing the older kids to come to America to see, maybe live temporarily with the family to try out, sort of, the adoption process. So they have a whole lot going on. That summer, they watched God work in a very powerful way as they helped almost 40 children find their forever families. Now, they had stepped into an area that was unfamiliar to them. They had brand new adoptees. By the way, you understand when you adopt a child from anywhere, you could end up with attachment disorders. You would end up with all kinds of issues, mental health issues, all kinds of things going on. They have this new ministry. They are coordinating a summer program for other. They're busy people. Until this point, the oldest child they had adopted was 6. My parents kept 6 to 8 foster children when I was younger. And just in a foster setting, we had things like feces being spread on the walls, beds being wet with soil on purpose, all kinds of issues at school on purpose. And that's just in a foster family for a little while. Can you imagine in an adoption situation where a child is not all that sure? They're in a foreign family, a foreign culture, they don't know the language, nothing is familiar, everything they have known is gone, and the issues that come your way is incredible. These are hurting children, and they've experienced so much trauma that the families they're being incorporated into, they're not really angels. It became clear some of them might never attach and bond fully to their new surroundings. Not just the Faskey family dealing with this, but remember, they're helping other families, and the other families are dealing with some of the same situations. And even though the host families are going through training, there's nothing they can prepare for some of the challenges that they'll face. And as the wheels begin to fall off, the families can't cope any longer, they bring them back to the Faskies. Guess what the Faskies do? Take them right in with open arms. Their home becomes a refuge for children whose adopted families can no longer continue to parent them. And they have all kinds of stresses and challenges and difficult situations. And people are telling them, God won't give you more than you can handle. And they're pulling their hair out. And they're going through stress and trials and tough times. And all these scenarios woven together created a unique story for this family. And people just keep saying, well, you know, the Bible says God won't give you more than you can handle. And they said, no, they must have had 2 or 3 big bands. Yeah, school bus maybe. But people are telling them, you'll be able to get through it. God won't give you more than you can handle. Does the Bible really say that? Some people, go ahead.
I just got to say, I think we have a problem with what it says, He will not give us more than we can handle. there's an area there that we think he can help us handle it for. That's not what he thinks.
That's right.
He'll push you until you learn. And sometimes that lesson is difficult.
That's exactly right.
It's easy for you, and it's not as hard as you can handle. And you may not shoot both.
Very true. He's going to push and get you out of your comfort zone. Our comfort zone, we think, is about all we can handle.
Right?
Yes.
Right. I've done those experiences I can in the end, whether it's death and a job or whatever. Yeah, it was crazy then, and they're touching it up. And then later on, it took me a long time to realize it wasn't perfect, because nothing's going to be, but when I thanked him, it could have been a lot worse. He got us through it, you know? I don't expect perfection, you know, it's not wrong, you know, it's the wrong thing to do, but he got us through it. You know?
Amen.
It wasn't the way we planned it, you know?
Yeah.
I think we have a preposition of what he plans to be, you know, and it's not that way. You have to learn to accept that it was what it was, and he got us through it.
Right.
Accept that.
You don't think you can handle it, but you get through it somehow and you look back on it.
Yes.
And it's different. Well, some people point to 1 Corinthians 10, verses 12 and 13, which says, "So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fail or fall. No temptation has seized you except what is common to man, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. But remember that the temptations that come into your life are no different from what others experience. And God is faithful. He will keep the temptation from becoming so strong that you can't stand up against it. When you are tempted, He will show you a way out so that you will not give in to it." People use this passage to justify the statement. Sounds familiar, right? Sounds similar. But context is key here. These verses are talking about what specifically? Temptation.
That's a lot different than handling.
That's a lot different than what you can handle, difficult situations. Yeah, idolatry in particular. Basically, the verses are teaching that everyone is tempted. All of us go through temptations. Each one of us has different weaknesses, different enticements that will grab our attention. But the point is, we will all face temptation. That's what these verses are talking about. So when temptation comes, you need to have a game plan in place. The promise we have from God in those very moments is you won't be tempted beyond your ability to overcome it. That's the promise. And yet we still need God in these very moments. Notice the comforts given. God is faithful, and He will also provide the way of escape. So He'll always be there, number one, that's the promise. And number two, He'll provide a way of escape. Those two comforts, those two promises are given. You can't endure suffering without a God who gives you a hope of a brighter tomorrow and a promise that He has a plan and a purpose for everything and everyone. You can't truly heal unless there is a God who can heal us. Even in the temptation scenario, it's more than we can handle. That's inherent in the promise given. You can't even handle the temptation. Because He says, I'll be with you and I'll give you a way out. Without Him, you wouldn't get through it. Without Him, you wouldn't make it. All of life is more than we can handle. Without God, we couldn't do it. We don't exist without God creating us in the first place. We don't breathe without the lungs He places in our bodies. We can't make decisions without the brain placed in our body. We don't feel and care without the heart, the soul that He placed in our body. We can't handle anything on our own. We have to have God. That's inherent in the promise. So just based on logic, we can't handle it. Not without His help. All of life is more than we can handle. So here's a better statement. God won't give you more than He can handle through you. That's a better way of saying it. It isn't that He won't give you more than you can handle. He won't give you more than He can handle in and through you. One of the greatest promises that God gives in Scripture is not that He will keep us out of difficult situations, but what? He'll get us through it. He'll be with us as we endure it. Psalm 46 and verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. He'll be there. That's what He promises. Not that He would take them away, but that He would be there with us. He doesn't promise that He won't, that we will only face things that we can handle. That's not a promise in Scripture. If we were able to handle everything on our own, who needs God? Often the biggest blessing of being in over our heads in life is you have the opportunity to rely on Him. That's what you were saying a while ago.
It took a little while too.
Yeah, it takes going through it,
Yeah.
looking back on it.
And it took some humbleness to realize that.
That He can take it on. He
What?
can get you through.
It-
Some way, somehow.
It's easier to, how's this? It's more human nature to lean on the world because to lean on God, it takes effort.
It takes faith.
Faith,
It takes a leap of faith.
and like, how hard is it to lean on the world? I mean, it's all around you.
Yep.
It's natural. You're part of the world. And so where your heart is going to be shows.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly right. Isaiah 41 and verse 10 says, Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. I will be there. That's the promise. The promise isn't, I won't give you anything you can't handle. It's, I will be with you through it and handle it for you. As overwhelming as the Paskey's life appears to be, they learned the valuable lesson of depending on God for the power to live a life that glorifies Him and helps others. And that just sort of came natural to them. There have been times when trusting in the Lord was a real struggle, but they always put their faith in Him. If everything that comes with being a family of 30, plus receiving discouraging comments seems like a lot to handle, there would be even more. There was a day, D-Day, April 23rd, 2017, it would bring a change that once again proved that life always has turns and difficulties that are too much to handle. Mr. Paskey and one of the sons were fishing in the pond in front of their house. Mrs. Paskey walked down to the pond to sit on the dock with them. Shortly after, a police officer shows up at the gate to their farm. And at first they thought he's just turning around, but he moved closer and parked as if he wanted to come in. So Mr. Paskey went down to meet him, and his wife could see them talking and could tell something isn't right. the officer handed Mr. Paskey a wallet that belonged to their son, Nathaniel. And in that moment, she knew, this is not good. She dropped to her knees. She begged God not to let it happen, not to let it be real. She knew in her heart her son, something had tragically happened to him, and she was praying that God would bring him back. No way to handle this. She was saying, there's no way I can get through this. Nathaniel had fallen asleep at the wheel and lost control of his car. He was only 21 years old. Way too young to leave this earth. He had been part of the Paskey family since they adopted him from Russia when he was 6 years old. And when he joined the family, he had a very hardened look in his eyes. He was very hard to get close to, very hard to love. He had been through a lot. He was filled with pain, with anger, with insecurity. He wasn't sure he liked the idea of having a new family. Over time, love endured. And they had a great relationship. Well, the next few days were a blur for the Paskey family, with funerals, with burying a child. Surely everything was about to calm down for them. It would have to, right? I mean, you can't just go through tragedy after tragedy. What else could they possibly face? They slowly tried to return to a routine. About a month later, they attempted to have a typical family day on the farm, riding horses, going swimming in the lake near their house. The kids were excited. This was the first thing they had done that seemed normal since their brother had passed. So they saddled 18 horses and prepared for a short trail ride to the lake. Just a typical family outing. Ride 18 horses.
Yeah.
Two of their daughters, Lily and Cherish, were the last two kids to get on their horses. Cherish was only 6 years old. She needed help. So Lily was helping her. Crazy how things change in a heartbeat. As Lily put Cherish on the horse moved in a way that jerked one of the reins from her hands. And as the rein hit the ground, the horse stepped on it. That caused it to back up and rear up. It tripped over itself and fell backwards. The horse fell on top of Cherish with such force, it knocked itself out and injured Cherish very badly. When the horse came to, it was pedaling around in a circle on its side, further injuring Cherish. And people kept telling them, God won't give you more than you can handle. Yeah, right. As any loving parent who has been in that scenario, or any scenario like it, you'd have to think and plead with the Lord. Not again. We can't go through this anymore. We can't handle it. It's too much. Without a doubt, the Paskeys are some of the most fascinating and incredible people you'd ever meet. The first time I heard their story in its entirety, I was blown away, to say the least. During their most difficult days, people kept telling them, God won't give you more than you can handle. But the truth is, God is sovereign and He can do whatever He wants to do. Right? You remember the words of Ecclesiastes 3, beginning with verse 1? There's a time for everything. Time to be born. What's the next phrase? A time to die. A time to plant, a time to harvest, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to destroy, a time to rebuild, a time to cry. It goes on to say there's a time to grieve. He has told us it's going to happen. Well, the Paskey family can tell you from firsthand experience that they believe God has given them far more than they could handle. They will tell you, we couldn't handle it, not on our own. We wouldn't have made it. We just leaned on Him. They trusted that He would never give them more than He could handle in their lives. There's a huge difference. Even in the most extreme circumstances, He carried them through it all. They survived because of His grace. They can't explain it, but sometimes the greatest gifts are the ones you can't explain, right? There's just a peace, even in the midst of the storm. God chooses what He's going to reveal to us and what He isn't. And sometimes the why in His actions He doesn't reveal. But the primary truths He has revealed. That He loves us and that He is with us through it all. No matter what we're going through, He can handle it. We can't. He can. One of the main reasons He can handle whatever we're going through is because He is a God who identifies with His creation. He knows what we're going through. That's number two. Number one, He won't give us more than He can handle. Number two, He knows what we're going through. He identifies with it. Now, we've all said it, or at least thought it. Jesus can't possibly know what I'm going through. Right? We've all thought it or said it. After all, He never had to experience what I'm dealing with. And usually we're going through some kind of physical suffering, feelings of being alone, or thinking we're the only one who's had to wrestle with a particular trial or conflict. And in a way, it's made worse by our not knowing the gospel really the way we should. We focus on the birth, we focus on the death, burial, and resurrection. It's the middle part we don't study enough. Life. When He came to earth, some 2,000 plus years ago, He was fully God and fully human. Just some of the things that we know He went through that we don't often think of. He knew what it was like to be exhausted. Right? It's okay to admit it. Some days, maybe even most days, we are tired. You know what that spells, right? Tard. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. Jesus knew all too well what it was like to be tired, exhausted. We forget He walked everywhere He went. And He traveled up and down the country. A country. If I had to walk from here to my house, I'd be exhausted. I just live right there. I can see it from here. You open the door. He knew what it was like to be exhausted. He knew what it was like to be betrayed. He was well acquainted with the pain of betrayal. Not just from Judas. The religious leaders betrayed Him. The people that should have known Him and recognized Him and welcomed Him, they betrayed Him. Those that followed Him, His own disciples, they would betray Him, or at least forsake Him. Those that were closest to Him. He knew what it was like to get stabbed in the back, to be talked about behind His back, to have people not like Him, try to trap him, accuse him, lie about him, so on and so forth. He knew what that was like. He knew what it was to suffer grief, to lose someone you love. He experienced heartache and sadness. At least twice we read about him crying in grief. He knew what it was like to be tempted. No, he didn't give in, but he knew what it was like to be tempted, right? Maybe you can accept the grief and the exhaustion. When it comes to fighting temptation, surely not Jesus, you think. The Son of God. But the writer of Hebrews reminds us that nothing could be further from the truth. He never committed a sin, but he was still tempted. Because he himself has suffered when tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. Hebrews 2:18. And he knew what it was like to be forsaken by God. Even when we feel like God has forsaken us, turned his back on us, Jesus too knows what it feels like. God had to turn his face away from his Son for a time. Well, it's plain and simple. Jesus knows what it's like to live as a human. Therefore, God knows what it was like. He got hungry. He got thirsty. He had to learn things that were difficult. He grew. He was glad. He was angry. He prayed. He exercised faith. He hurt when he saw someone else hurting. He hurt himself. Hebrews 4 verse 15 goes on to say, that's why we're so thankful we have a high priest like him. He understands our weaknesses. He faced all of the same testings that we face. So we will face the ebb and flow of life, the ups and downs. We will go through good times and we will go through difficult times. Times when everything makes sense and times when nothing makes sense. Hopefully, we get to live lives long enough to get the senior discount at restaurants. But when you approach the final chapter of your life here on earth, the goal is not to say, boy, my life is comfortable. Anybody say that?
I don't say that, but I appreciate the blessing.
Sure. But it wasn't always comfortable, right? I mean, there were times.
There's a difference.
Yeah, the goal is to say what Paul has said in Philippians 4. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am in to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. What's the last phrase? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I think I maybe put that up on the screen. I don't know if you can see it. I thought it'd be better in this corner so you could see it better. I'll still work on it. That has to be one of the most misquoted, misused verses in all the Scriptures. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It has nothing to do with dunking a basketball, hitting a game-winning home run, winning the lottery, closing a business deal, or any of the things that many of the people that have it tattooed on themselves somewhere want us to think it means. We misuse that passage incredibly. Just ask the Paskey family. They have learned by experience, I can do all things through Christ, who gives me strength when I don't have any, who gets me through tragedy when I just couldn't take another step. The good times and the bad times. Christ was always there. They suffered more than any family should. That's them, by the way. Family picture. They suffered more than any other family I know of, and yet through the times of highs and lows, God molded them. Each of their adoptions came with its own challenges, but the blessings far outweighed the struggles, the life transformations they saw in their children. And in the lives of others all around them are immeasurable. Suffering has brought their family closer together. It has given each member of their family compassion for others who have experienced extreme hurt. It's one of the kindest, most loving families you'll ever meet. God gave them way more than they could handle. But He handled it for them. It wasn't always pretty, but it was always beautiful. So with about 5 minutes left, let me ask this question. Before tonight, in our discussion, what came to your mind when you heard the statement, God won't give you more than you can handle?
Responding to somebody insensitively would be a mentality of, I've always said, you've survived 100% of your bad days, right? Like telling them, let's say at the beginning of the struggle, like, hey, guess what? It'll be okay. You'll get through it. Hope you figure it out. I didn't always take the next step of, okay, you're going to get through it, I promise. But how are you going to get through it isn't by yourself.
Okay. So insensitive was the first.
Yeah, for sure.
Anybody else? What did you think?
It was the person that a friend of mine came off the car 2 years ago. I was 20 years old. They were hard at me. She's going through one parent. And I think of that, and I'm trying to working with her to explain that in the right way, Wish I had a tape recording of whatever you said, to do that. I'm trying to help her do that. As since I've seen it personally, that happened to my mama. That's what came to my mind.
Okay.
I find a lot of times that people make statements that haven't been through hardships and situations, so it's easy to make a statement when you haven't been there. But when you've been there, you realize that you didn't come out the other side by your own strength and own power. And obviously, you learned the lesson where your strength was. It wasn't in yourself. I thank Job for that lesson.
Yes.
Right? I think if you look at it from the point of view that God gives you the difficulties, then you wonder why you're being singled out for this particular difficulty, and that someone else, someplace else, is not feeling these same things or hasn't gone through these trials, or their life is pretty good. And then thinking you put God on a particular spot. Because I'm not sure that all the difficulties in life come directly from God. They come from just living.
Yes.
And you get into situations that it only takes God to get you out of.
That's right. That's true.
God and His people, through His people.
I think a lot of us put ourselves in situations we can't handle because we succumb to temptation. I think that's what ultimately happens with people who can't handle certain situations that really have God involved. That's right. And I
Principal, I'd say, you know, we go back to get a statement from Joe, what he went through, when he came out on the other side, all of it was God from the beginning to the end. And of course, Mike made the statement, this stuff happens, we're all world for, world. It's not only stuff happens, but you gotta remember that Satan caused the same to happen. And so therefore, there's, there's just circumstances that happens, then there's things that's happened with intent, from the spirit world. So, but God, if you're in Christ, God is there to help you through all of it. So,
He is there. Ever-present help in times of trouble.
but I have to be very careful. I think all of us have to be careful when we're walking in situations in our type of lifestyle that we have, the country we live in, and financial situations we are, we're able to make statements to those that are not equal or the same. Say, make that kind of statement, you have to be very careful. You know, I think Shane brought that out earlier,
I know I hear a lot. They have a bad day, you know. Oh, I need a drink, or not saying just get drunk or whatever, but that's their first answer. I hear that a lot. Like, oh, I'm gonna go home, have a glass of wine and a bath, and go to bed. Guess in and of itself, whatever. But shouldn't it be like, okay, I need to go pray, or that's advice more than you can handle is. In that example, the drink isn't going to do nothing.
It's going to make it even harder for them.
Yeah.
Well, we will continue next week with the promise we mentioned on Sunday. You remember what it was? I told you I was going to add it to this.
Heaven or hell?
It has to do with heaven. The lie that we tend to believe, God just gained another angel. That's the lie that we sometimes believe or say, but is it true? God just gained another angel. Sounds good. Sounds nice. Sounds comforting. You think of clouds and harps and wings and covers. It still is, as far as I know.
what angel are you going to come?
Yes. So that's what we will talk about next week. Thank you for coming to class tonight. Any announcements that need to be made?
I make one request. The ladies that are sitting here, I want to show of hands what type of practice you want on Mother's Day, on Friday.
That is
Whether a good practice or
that is
a non-gun practice. But, well, I gotta find out how much these ladies want.
The crepes, souffle.
Trumpets with that?
Hey, this is not taking your order tonight. We're giving you a choice. If the continental or if we have to go out to bacon and eggs and potatoes and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
And remember, I gotta bring this up. If you're gonna go out and eat a big lunch right after church. All right, continental breakfast, raise your hand. Otherwise, fruit and, yeah, coffee.